Hey baby, I hear the blues are calling. It's time for the Frazier on Frasier podcast. Welcome, one and all. I'm your host, Adam Frazier, and with me, as always, is my good friend and co-host, Wes Corwin.
Thank you.
Hi, Wes. How you doing?
You're doing great.
Good. All right, so we've got, we're talking about Frasier Season 1, Episode 3, Dinner at 8.
Dinner at 8, Season 1, Episode 3. What a story it was. What a tale.
So there are a couple of important things that happened in this episode. The biggest one I can think of. Well, so this is the first episode I think we've seen Niles really interact with his dad.
Right. They've never been. I don't think they've been in the same room up to this point. Oh, they were in the pilot.
Briefly.
To help him move in, but
this
otherwise,
is definitely the most interaction they've had up until this point.
Yes,
so we kind of get to see how Frasier and Niles react to their dad.
Yes.
And Niles reacts to him much the same way Frasier does. They don't really get along. They don't have the same tastes.
Not at all.
The other thing that I can think of of significance is that we do have the first meeting of Niles and Daphne.
Which was it's interesting that Niles is very interested in Daphne, and I don't know if we're going to learn more, but it seems possible, because he tried to sort of arrange Daphne to go with them on this dinner situation.
Yes,
and it feels like he said that Maris was not feeling that she was having an episode. Is it also possible, in my head canon, that he never invited Maris and was trying to loop, because he's obviously very interested in Daphne.
Knowing the type of character Maris is, I don't think Niles would really have to make up an excuse for her not to want to come.
I see.
But let's get into the episode.
Get into it. Let's stop toying with it.
So we start off. Frasier is in his booth doing his radio show.
In the studio.
We have a woman calling. She doesn't want to. She's avoiding her in-laws.
Her in-laws come over. They want to be entertained, and she's sick of it. The last time the in-laws stopped by, her husband told them to duck down, hide on the floor until they went away.
And that's been her strategy.
That's kind of been the game plan from then out. In fact, as she's called into Frasier, she says, "Shh, they're here," and then she hits the floor, and Frasier starts whispering along.
Which is a hell of a coincidence.
An incredible
that they would just show up while they're on the radio show. And I believe the actress playing Pam, I believe is her name. It's Patti LuPone.
Okay. What would we know her from?
I know her from Steven Universe.
Okay.
Where she plays Yellow Diamond, does the voice of Yellow Diamond, but she's also, I believe, well known for pulling up the IMDb page, Witness. With Harrison Ford, the one where he's an Amish. He lives in an Amish community.
Okay. I only know Harrison Ford from Air Force One.
Oh, you gotta see Witness.
Oh, okay. Does he punch someone out of a plane?
Yeah, there's a great scene where there are some punks making fun of the Amish people that he's living with, and I think he punches the punk because the Amish, of course, they don't believe
in violence,
right?
But
so
Harrison Ford does.
He does believe in violence,
and he says, "Get off my buggy," and punches it. That's the end of it.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't think Frasier's advice. He advises her to confront them, but then
she says, "Next time, I promise."
Right
now, shush, and then hangs up the phone.
And then we move on
to
our next scene, which is titled "How Many Sharks Died?"
How many sharks? Which is, I expected that line of dialogue to be delivered, because it turned. So Frasier went out, got Martin. Frasier and Martin went out, and Martin got a new suit on Frasier's dime. And they walked to an Armani, or they walked past an Armani, and on the way to the Armani, Martin saw this slick suit in a mayonnaise jar, I believe.
So it was wadded up into a mayonnaise jar to demonstrate that it resists wrinkles.
Impossible to wrinkle this.
Although it looked very wrinkly to me while Martin was wearing it.
Yeah, I mean, the effects, we didn't mention last episode, but we've seen so far a boom in the shot, a lot of glare. And
yeah, there was a scene in particular where there was a light in the background that was just hitting the camera lens, and you could really see it.
There's in storytelling, you're supposed to show and not tell, but if you cannot show, you have to tell as much as possible. And Frasier, we're seeing a little bit of that, but the heart of the show, oh my. So, yes, Martin puts on the suit, Niles stops by, meets Daphne, they have that exchange where it's revealed Niles has not been mentioned in any way but in a negative light.
Well, that's the implication.
That is the implication.
Yeah, but we also learned that he apparently studied abroad.
Went to Cambridge.
Went to Cambridge, which I don't think ever comes up again.
Oh, good.
And he's obviously, I guess we'll say, attracted to Daphne.
He is a self-described Anglophile, so
right.
He loves the English, loves the British, and she is very British.
But at the same time, she wasn't quite what he was expecting when Frasier mentioned that he'd hired an English woman.
Right. Not sure what he meant, but he did. Yes, he was attracted in a way that he did not expect to be attracted to Daphne.
So they're I think the shark skin suit gets Niles and Frasier talking about the fact that, again,
how are we related to this man? He's into shark skin suits.
Exactly. So I believe this takes them to the kitchen where they're discussing, oh, well, you know, he did a lot to provide for us when we were a kid. He gave us...
We could enjoy the finer things because he worked his tail off to provide for us the finer things. So we should have him partake in the finer things. And I'm on board with all that, but then they take a shot at the 1812 Overture, a fine piece of... And they're like, can you imagine anyone think... And I'm sitting going, hey, what? Can we not all enjoy Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture on occasion? Isn't that in many ways the Carly Rae Jepsen of classical music? You can't... I was offended.
I really took that personally.
I did, to the extent that I'm bringing it up now. I when we were watching it, I said, "Hey," and I felt A on the inside.
You stood up
when I did.
You flipped your chair over.
I got animated. I got heated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They decide that they're going to take their father to a night out at a fancy dinner. The Cigar Volant.
The Cigar Llama. Now, does that come up again in the Frasier?
Yes, it does. It is one of their regular haunts.
But it's impossible to get into. You gotta call
but I mean, it's out of all the fancy restaurants that they go to in the show, I think Cigar Volant comes up the most frequent.
Okay. And is it ever explained in a later episode what happened to their lost reservation? Not to spoil anything, but they make a reservation. Shoot. Frasier, Niles is like, we can't get a reservation at the Cigar Llama, and he's like, watch, and he says, I'm Dr. Crane, Dr. Frazier Crane, and he gets a reservation, and it's very impressive. It establishes he's got some clout in this town. He's a big radio host in Seattle, and 2 scenes from now, it turns out they lost the reservation, and I spoiled that, and that's on, this is a podcast.
No, I mean, we're talking about the episode. I don't think we can... I'm assuming whoever's listening to this has probably watched the episode before. And now is going back to listen to our take on it.
I hope so. It would be an odd choice if you decided to listen to warm yourself up for a Frasier episode.
Right.
But whatever you do, it's important. The only thing in between those 2 scenes, I believe, is a scene between Frasier and his producer where he gets amped up for a good
No, I think that comes after.
That comes after? Okay.
I think so. It was a really brief scene, so I don't think it really contributed much. I do want to mention, so I believe the Cigar Volant, its name translates to the flying cigar.
Oh, yeah.
Which is just sort of a nonsense name, which I think all of the names, the fancy restaurants in the show, have nonsense names in other languages.
That's fun.
I think that was just something that the producers were there for fun.
What's the coffee shop called, and what does that translate?
Cafe Nervosa. I don't know if that actually does translate into anything.
Because I would assume it means the nervous cafe. Is it not?
I mean, that would be my guess.
Okay.
Sure. So they decide to take Martin to the Cigar Llama.
Yes.
They have their reservation. They're going to do it.
Yes.
We go to the next scene,
Right.
which is the one that you just brought up, where it's Frasier and Roz. It's really just a scene between Frasier and Roz. I don't think it has any effect outside of
Roz brings up a terrible date she has, which is a theme that has been brought up in previous episodes. She is unlucky in love. And then Frasier, she says, 30 seconds to go, you gotta get in there. And he's like, no, we gotta do the thing. And Roz is like, I don't want to do the thing. And
it makes her do a cheer.
Makes her do like a cheer that we have the best radio show, which is an interesting glimpse into Frasier.
It is. I thought it was interesting that the man that Roz was dating had a fear of sticky things.
Yes. He couldn't touch honey. She was making her famous sweet and sour shrimp, asked to pass the honey. Could not touch sticky things. Can't do it.
Yeah.
Has a deathly fear.
Is there a medical term for that? I'm going to look that up.
Quick research.
Fear of sticky... No, not stocky. Sticky things. I'm going to butcher this. Arachnotubertyrophobia?
You nailed it.
Yeah, I'm sure I did.
That's for sure. Arachnotubertyrophobia.
Known as a specific phobia, that thing I just said, focuses on extremely niche things, which means that even things that can broadly come out of a fear of choking or a fear of a sticky substance, it has. So I don't know if it refers to a specific thing.
Just sort of a general catch-all for weird fear.
Right.
Fascinating.
So, which is kind of insensitive, don't you think?
A little bit.
Like
yeah.
we don't know what to call your fear. It's
Yeah.
just weird. So we're just going to call it this.
There aren't enough of you to make it a name.
We don't get you. You don't all get to have your own unique name.
You're the etc. phobia. You're the rest of the phobias.
And then, so yeah, we have the scene with Roz and Frasier. We move on. Mm-hmm. Next scene, we've got dinner at 8. The title card of the episode. We've
hit the meat of it. Daphne's gonna leave. She's got a poker game.
She calls Frasier a Bobby Dazzler.
A Bobby Dazzler.
Because of the way he's dressed, he takes it as a compliment.
And of course, that's an English term in American English.
I don't think it is. I think that was some nonsense.
Bobby Dazzler. It's a famous Cockney English phrase, and when you translate it to American English, it translates to Robert Dazzler.
I guess so.
Yeah.
So Niles arrives.
Yes.
He arrives with a present for his dad, which I think the implication is that he was actually he always intended to give
Daphne.
Right.
Very
clotted
important.
cream.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a very English
thing to get. And she was like, oh, I love that. And he was like, oh, you can share it. And it's a suspicious thing that Niles is doing and he insists that he is happily married to Maris, and just the other day he kissed her for no reason at all, which is proof he's a faithful man.
I mean, of course. I mean, if you love someone, you would just kiss them for no reason.
Absolutely, of course.
and Frasier picks up on this pretty quickly, I think.
Yes, Frasier's kind of on. He's on the ball. He knows what's going on.
So Martin comes out and he's not wearing his new shark skin suit.
Doesn't have the suit. He's got a couple. He's got this sweater vest. It's pretty classy, but he is not wearing the suit. And they're like, "Yeah, where's your suit?" And he's like, I got tartar sauce on it or some such."
All right, it was a retirement dinner. I believe. You can't keep anything nice.
Can't keep anything nice, says Martin. So they try to call the Cigar Llama and ask, "Hey, what's your dress code?" in much more formal terms. And it is revealed that they don't have a reservation. Like, hey, we're calling for this. We have a reservation this time. We want to ask about dress code. No, I have a reservation this time. Lost. Don't have a reservation. They try to get in a call. They try to put up dukes. The restaurant hangs up on them, which is outrageous. And they don't get to go to the Cigar Llama. At which point, Martin is like, oh, well, if we want to go to we could go to the timber mill.
The timber mill.
Which is Martin's favorite. Favorite place. He enjoys it. You can get a steak that thick. It's an audio medium, so you can't see how thick this is. And
it's very thick. I'm looking at his fingers right now.
It's a thick steak. It's this thick for $8.95. If you could imagine me like pressing my fingers together quickly, it takes me about a second and a half. That thick.
You can do it at home.
You can do it at home. Get your fingers and put them at a distance. That's how big they are for $8.95.
So Niles and Frasier are a bit hesitant because this doesn't sound like a fancy restaurant. It doesn't sound like the type of restaurant they would choose.
It is a significant step down from the Cigar Llama.
Exactly. Which Martin, I think, rightly points out that, he was willing to go to their place. Right. Why wouldn't they go to the timber mill?
Right.
And Frasier and Niles realized this, and they decided, okay, well, yes, we will go to the timber mill. I think it's Frasier who decides for them.
Yes. Going to compromise, go to the timber mill.
Right. And so they're off. They're off to the timber mill.
Off to the timber mill.
And so we get to the timber mill. And they check in. The waitress there says, we have a dress code. And Frasier and Niles, they automatically assume they're referring to their father, who is the least well-dressed of the two. They have their suits, their ties, and Martin just has his, little sweater vest.
Yes.
But the waitress says, "Oh no, it's not Martin who's violating the dress code. It's you guys."
Grabs the tie, snips the tie, snips Niles' tie. That's what they do here. They snip ties.
They cut their ties off of them.
Yeah.
With giant scissors.
It's casual dining. They like to keep it cash. They have comically and they yell when they do it, timber, which is not. First of all, if you don't mind me complaining about it, lumberjacks don't use scissors to cut down trees, so it doesn't make sense to yell timber when you cut off a tie. If you had a small axe and cut that would be something.
That would be something.
But they use small scissors. And they snip the ties, and then they yell timber, and then you get a free dessert at the end of it.
Yeah. So this does beg the question. How upset would you be in that situation?
Well, here's the thing. I'm not a tie person.
Well, me neither. But assuming you were,
if I wore a tie to an establishment, and they were like
a tie that you probably paid a decent amount of money for.
I've never bought a tie that wasn't a clip-on. So.
I've never bought a tie that wasn't given to me by my aunt. So.
Well, then you didn't buy it. It was given to you by your aunt. So that's. But if somebody took a tie that I valued, my favorite clip-on tie, and cut it, I would be peeved. I would be peeved.
And the promise of a dessert doesn't.
Here's the thing, and I feel.
Mud pie. That doesn't tempt you.
I side with Martin in many circumstances. I feel like in this circumstance he could have been like, "Hey, maybe change into a cheaper tie. There's a fun thing that happens if you wear a tie." And if he wore a tie, he kind of set them up to get goofed on. If he wore a tie and it got snipped, he would have been like, see, we're all in on it. But he set up his sons to bring their expensive silk ties. They're Hugo Boss ties. Niles was a Hugo Boss tie to get snipped at the timber mill for a free dessert.
I decided to look up Hugo Boss because the name sounded somewhat familiar.
Right.
Maybe it was a tie that my aunt had bought me at some point.
Oh!
I don't know. I looked it up. I typed into Google Hugo Boss, and the first thing it autofills is Hugo Boss Nazi.
Oh. Is it? Is he one?
So I thought, okay, well, maybe there was a famous Nazi named Hugo Boss, and there's a clothing company named Hugo Boss. They're not necessarily related. That's not the case.
No.
Hugo Boss was a Nazi. He produced uniforms for the Nazi Party and the Nazi youth all throughout World War II.
Right.
And is still apparently operating today.
Yeah, fashion's weird.
I guess so.
He's just he is. Is he still alive today?
No, he was. He was making uniforms for the Nazis. I don't think he's still alive.
Okay. And the brand is still out
there.
The
brand is apparently very still out there. No, Hugo Boss died in 1948.
Probably for the best. Why did we name this company after him?
I don't know. Apparently, of all people, Danny Glover decided to protest them at some point.
Good. I love Danny Glover in Angels in the Outfield.
Yeah, I do too. Do you think at some point when he was protesting Hugo Boss, he was saying, I'm getting too old for this shit.
I'm getting too old for this Hugo Boss shit. Yes, I assume every day Danny Glover wakes up and says to himself, I'm getting too old for this shit.
So, Hugo Boss and the Nazis aside, Frasier and Niles sit down to an evening with their father at the timber mill.
Yeah, they don't take off their cut ties, which is
a
thing
they wear that.
Yeah, it's a thing you can do with your tie. Is after if someone cuts your tie, you can go and then take it off. But they seem to be trapped in wearing these ties.
So they
I don't know if they're dexterous men. I don't know if they can take off a tie, but they clearly pull.
I would think if anything would be easier, to take off the tie
because it's barely tied at that point. You just sort of loosen it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they order their food. Niles has some ridiculous order.
Ugh.
He
orders a drink. I don't remember the drink, but he said 3.
Something that requires 3 pearl onions, which
not 2 and not 4. If it's 1 more or 1 less, he's going to send it back. And then Frazier wanted the same. And then I expected Martin to say something like, I'll have a Bud Light to comparison, but he ordered a drink that I also don't know.
It was a Stoli Gibson.
Stoli Gibson.
I'm going to look that up.
Okay.
I've never heard of a drink where, I guess it's kind of like a martini.
Okay.
Or a cocktail,
Sure.
I guess I can kind of see that, having like a fancy cocktail with like 2 pearl onions.
Sure. Yeah, I bet it's nice.
I don't drink, so I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't. I expected the joke to be like, he said like a long drink name, and then she would have been like, we have Pepsi. Do you want? And instead, shit on the timber mill, but he made like a complicated order, and she wasn't like, we don't do. She was like, yeah, well, I'll do my best, and that was good.
They order their steaks from the steak trolley.
There's a big wagon. There's a big trolley. I guess it's a big push, and you pick it off, kind of like a lobster, a red lobster. Except it's a cut of meat that they just have on.
It'd be a hell of a thing if they just had the cow there, and
that would be something though. It would be like, is this? But then you'd have to do it in like groups of 20. You'd have to have like a group of 20 and be like, "Are you okay? This is the cow that you're all gonna okay."
That I think people are fine with choosing their lobster to kill. I think most people will draw the line at choosing the cow.
Choosing the cow.
So Martin orders for them, and they just get all the fixins.
Niles tries to order a very specific kind of color. He doesn't want mauve. He doesn't want a light pink. He wants a very specific very specific temperature. Frasier, meanwhile, when asked, "And what would you like?" he asks if you could turn one of them over so he can see the other side of the steak. Martin dismisses their wishes and says, "Hey, we'll get those 3 cooked medium rare." And that's it.
And that's
with all the fixings, with 100% of the fixings, none of the fixings left off.
And that's I think that's a good idea. I don't think. I wonder what they would have actually brought them if they'd gone through with Niles' order.
Right.
Because judging from the waitress's reaction, I don't think they were ever going to get exactly what he had ordered.
No, absolutely not. No, not in this.
So they begin their meal. They've got baked potatoes that are brought to them soon after they've just begun their salads.
Yes.
And they start getting into it. They start Frazier and Niles, they kind of start knocking the timber.
Kind of start taking a big old dump.
And
big old dump on the timber.
And on the waitress, they're a little
snooty, a little rude.
Yeah.
A little terse.
And Martin calls them out on this.
Mm-hmm.
He likes the timber mills. He doesn't.
Yeah. Not only does he like it, he points out there are plenty of people that are also enjoying their dinner. There's no reason for you guys to shit on the whole thing.
Exactly. And they briefly, I think, agree to, stop their jabs, but then immediately go back and start making fun of the place again. At which point, Martin just says, "I've had it. I've done with you jackasses. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go to Duke's for a nightcap."
Mm-hmm. Does Duke's come up later in the Frasier?
Duke's is a place.
Another haunt. Yes.
Is another place. Specifically, he talks about their mother.
Yes.
Who we know from past conversations between Frazier and Niles was a very classy woman. Not they take mostly from their mother, Frazier and Niles.
We've heard in the show Frazier and Niles refer to their mother. I don't know if we've heard Martin really talk about his wife.
Not yet. No, I don't think we
This
have.
is the first time and Martin says she'd love the opera, of course, but she'd also love a ball game. She'd have a hot dog once in a while. And most importantly, she'd never make somebody feel small for their
Or second rate. She was too classy for that.
Too classy.
And if she saw the way you two behaved tonight, she would be ashamed.
Like I am. And then cuts out. And Lee doesn't even have a bite of the mud pie.
No, he leaves before the mud pie can come.
Before the mud pie can even get here.
So of course, this resonates, I guess, with Frazier now. This shames them into realizing that they've kind of messed up, and that they need to try and find some way to make it up to their dad.
Yeah.
And the idea they decide on is that they're going to sit there in the restaurant, clean their plates,
right.
As a tribute to their father, to make sure, I guess, that he knows that... I don't quite follow the logic of it.
It's kind of it seems like Frazier and Niles don't necessarily believe in, for two psychotherapists, they don't believe in talking others, but they believe in large symbolic gestures.
Yeah.
So they're really into we should apologize to our dad and let him know we're not going to do this again. They instead decide we're going to eat 100% of this basically 4-course Texas Roadhouse style meal with a steak and a baked potato with all the fixings, and we're going to eat the mud pie, and we're going to have the full salad at the salad bar. And that'll be how we make it up to Dad. We're going to eat all this food that we hate for him.
And do they tell their dad about this afterwards?
No. I mean, as far as we know, and I haven't seen episode 4. I've been watching the show. As far as I know, they never leave the restaurant.
The rest of the show takes place in the restaurant because we see... during the credits, of course, we have our in-credits scene. Mm-hmm. Frazier and Niles are still there eating their food. Right. It looks as though most of the other patrons of the Timber Mill have left.
Right.
There's someone sweeping up. The waitresses are basically just doing nothing, sitting around just watching them eat.
Right.
They want to go home.
They would love to go.
There are these two guys that are just picking at their food.
Right.
And yes, so the rest of the series just takes place at the Timber Mill. They never finish the food. But they are determined to finish it.
Sort of a Sisyphus style where they just can't finish the challenge.
Sort of like I have no mouth and I'm a scream type, scenario. Where
Harlan Ellison style nightmare.
Yes, it's tragic. So that's pretty much. Frasier episode 3.
Yeah,
I think we went through everything. What were your thoughts, Wes?
Here's the thing, and I feel it's interesting from a sitcom perspective. It is, and it's happened. I think the first 3 episodes. Frasier isn't completely afraid to leave a loop unclosed. You know what I mean? Usually, one of these shows would have that's the second act turnover where Martin would yell at them, and the third act would be devoted to making it up to him. Frasier isn't afraid to sort of leave it out there in we don't know if Martin's cool with... They haven't closed that loop. They haven't apologized and worked it out emotionally. That might carry over into future episodes. But for now, they've acknowledged that they're doing wrong. They might try to do better later. It is usually... it's an unfair comparison. It's an apples and oranges thing, but another sitcom like Full House puts Full House.
Okay.
Full House puts a lot of effort into like the A story ties into the B story. There's always a saccharine, sugary speech at the end that very plainly states the moral. There's a big hug. It's very commercially. It's interesting to see a show that's not afraid to like, hey, one main character just finished yelling at the other, and they don't make up.
It's for adults, Wes.
It is. This won an Emmy.
I mean, I agree with you. I think in these early episodes, what we're really seeing is they're just really trying hard to establish the relationship between these different characters. Mm-hmm. They're not really as caught up in A stories and B stories.
Yeah.
We'll get to that later, I think. But right now, yeah, they're very straightforward stories, and I don't know how I feel about it. I'm looking forward to, I think, some of the more complex stories with A, B, and even C stories.
Ooh, how exciting!
So we'll get to that.
In this, so we ranked the past 2 episodes. But here's the thing: I would like to ask you, because you've seen every episode of Frasier.
I have.
But you, so you're intimately
for the sake of this podcast, I've been kind of trying to hold back on like revealing too much, or even just stating the fact that I've seen all these episodes and know how exactly everything in this show plays out.
Yes,
but
you have an encyclopedic knowledge of the entire show. You've seen the past, the present, and the future of Frasier. You know everything. Within the larger scope of the first season, how do you think the first 3 episodes stack to the rest, and how important are they in the story we're going to go on for the rest of the season?
Well, I think I was planning on talking about this a little later on the season, but I might as well mention it now. I think that at this point, the producers, the writers, the actors, I don't think anyone is entirely certain that the show is going to go beyond 1 season.
Sure.
It's a spin-off.
It's a spin-off of Cheers.
Which is a highly successful television show.
The second spin-off of Cheers.
With the first one, which was, a total train wreck.
Yeah.
Didn't last more than a couple episodes.
Not received well.
So I think they're trying to play it safe, to a certain degree. Mm-hmm. Do you have a particular joke that you thought was the best?
Oh man, so it's an anti-joke. I really liked. There was a moment that demonstrated the disconnect between Martin and Niles, and the difference between Martin's sense of humor and Frasier and Niles, where Niles, trying to set up what felt like a very obvious or punny joke, said, "Oh, my patient had a Freudian slip recently. He meant to say at dinner with his wife, pass the salt. Instead, he said, I don't want to, but
You've ruined my life, you blood-sucking shrew."
Yes. You've ruined my life, you blood-sucking shrew. And Frasier and Niles both laugh at this because he set up an expectation that's paid off a different way. And Martin just sort of nods along and he goes, "Oh, I bet she didn't like that." And that made me laugh very hard. It's just the impossibility sometimes for humor to traverse that scope. Yeah, it was so fun to watch Niles' face light up as he saw Frasier's face light up, and then he immediately receded into himself and was when Martin said, "I guess you didn't like that," and he went, "No, Dad, no."
I thought that was a very good joke.
That was
very well constructed.
Not only well, I think very well performed by David Hyde Pierce, who really shined.
And Martin and
it was well acted across the board.
Exactly.
We haven't run into a weird performance from anyone yet.
We might as well briefly touch on the next episode,
Sure.
Titled "I Hate Frasier Crane."
I'm very excited. I saw it on the next one, and I was like, I can't wait.
Frasier becomes the target of a hate campaign organized by a local newspaper columnist, so Martin and Daphne encourage him to fight back.
This is such an odd... I'm enjoying the show. I love the show. It takes place in such a specific time frame because Frasier hosts a radio show and is apparently commercially viable, which is crazy all by itself. And also, but in this way, it's ahead of its time.
We say on our podcast.
But in this time, it's interesting in the 2020s. Usually TV shows are like, oh yeah, like somebody's cyberbullying me. It is interesting that there's this TV show that is about a newspaper columnist that apparently decides to take aim at Frasier and make him feel bad about his program. It's so close to what we deal with now, but it's the equivalent of if they made like a bullying episode in an Amish community and they were being bullied through like the telephone or Morse code. It's just it's an interesting dynamic. It's an interesting time thing.
Well, we'll get to that episode next week. Until then, thank you for listening and good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.